Come in and
Shake
make
it up.
shake it up a little bit, shake it up.
Oh, this is always right. You know, thank you all for coming, by the way. Thank you out in Zoom land as well. Have you guys ever been to one of those Tony Robbins events? You ever seen those?
Yeah.
You see all the energy that you get at those things? This is not it. This is more like Ben Stein, you know who that is. Anyway, thank you all for coming. I know you have much better things to do than sit in here and go over compliance stuff. However, this is important because it's part of how you get the paycheck. And we all know how important that can be. Everybody here should be familiar, at least know what command is. And your TCs, hopefully they're familiar with command as well. So command is our transaction management system, as well as, you know, other things for lead gen. I'm focused on the transaction management side of it and on compliance.
And I just want to reiterate something. Your commission checks will be held if your file is not complete. And you can come cry to me, you can come cry to Bruce or Megan or whoever you want, and we're gonna say no.
But just remember, John's the mean one.
Yeah, so if you want a nicer no, don't come to me, go to Bruce. But just want to let you know, the deadline's 11 o'clock. If we receive the check by 11 that day, if your file is clean, we will ace and each it that day. You will have it the next morning, free and clear, all available.
Depending on your bank.
If we receive the check and your file is not clear, it will automatically be held to the next day. Okay, so it's important that when you're closing, you work with your TC to make sure your file's clear, because they're probably reaching out to you 5 times and you're ignoring their communications. And they're trying to tell you, I'm missing these 3 docs and your file's gonna be held. And then when your check is held and you get the email, your check is on hold, you'll be like, what the heck? And then your TC is gonna be like, I called you 5 times, you didn't respond, right? So, help your TCs, make it happen. Because we get a lot of that, and then we point to this, and the TC says, I talked to them 3 times, they never got me the docs. And so, you guys are a team, right? Let's be your team. I want to do it.
Okay. All right, so going back to command. We all know that there are templates in there for various types of transactions that you might get involved in. And what we have tried to do over the last few months is reorganize those templates so that some of the templates are more specific to a particular type of transaction. And then within each of those templates, the flow of the documents is more aligned with the way the transaction flows. So that'll make it easier on your TCs, hopefully, on you guys, hopefully, as well as on the compliance auditors when they're going through the transaction looking for documents. So in order to do that, we've designed all these new templates. This does not yet include commercial templates, which will be rolled out shortly. This is just for the standard residential, real estate, single family residence, land, non-commercial, that sort of thing. But hopefully you've all had a chance to access the QR code so you can see this document up here. Each of those blue entities there will have a link that'll bring up a PDF document, which will give you, if you choose to print it out, it'll give you a hard copy of what's going to be required for the new transaction.
And just so you know, there's a lot of forms on there. There's different codes on there. If it's R, that means it's required.
If it's yellow, that's required. So, Vince, if you could please bring up the listing residential non-trustor entity. So we tried to take some of the guesswork out of forcing you to have to know what's going to be required for a particular type of transaction. So if it's not a trust, if it's not a corporation, if it's not some other entity, an LLC or whatever, if you're going to list a property, you choose this first transaction template. On the listing side, this is much how it will appear in command, except that you won't see all 3 of these columns at the same time. you're on the listing column within command, you'd see what's on the left. And that's kind of the breakdown of the different categories of forms that you can see there. You can see the color coding on this template. For the yellow, which are the required documents, the blue is conditionally required, depending on other circumstances that might fall into play. You know, you might have to use a single party compensation agreement instead of a standard residential listing. You know, things like that. If there's tenants, then it would be conditionally required that you might have to do a TOFA or tenant estoppel certificate, things like that. You'll notice too, if you happen to list a property and then and then you bring in a buyer yourself, you're gonna have buyer broker documents that you might need to use. Those are now in the under contract section. You kind of streamlined a lot of the stuff, reorganized it, made it easier. I'll tell you as you're going through this stuff over the next days, weeks, maybe hours, I don't know. If you or your TCs see something, because I'm not infallible, John's not infallible. If you see something that you don't think makes sense, make an argument. Let me know. Tell me why you don't think it makes sense, and maybe we can readjust it. It's not, hard and fast engraved in stone. We're just trying. What we're trying to do is come up with a system that is both easy to use, easy to follow through, as well as maintain the protection that we need for you guys and for the office so we can maintain profitability, avoid coming under the microscope with DRE and dealing with legal problems.
And any of you have been through a legal dispute, and I know you guys been on the board with legal disputes, they're not fun.
No.
They're time, they're stressful, they cost money. So
No.
what we're trying to do is avoid those situations. I also want to know, we also got a lot of requests, especially from your TC and your staff, like, is there a checklist of what forms I need to have ready for my sellers to go? So these documents are essentially the checklist. And I want to point out, he did listing on entity and he had all the entities up there, but you can see we have literally gone through and say, these are the different types of listings you are going to take. And you just need to make sure you pull the right checklist. So if you pull the wrong checklist, there's a trust there, and you pull a regular residential non-entity, you're not going to have the right checklist, right? So you need to make sure you get the right checklist. We see a lot of errors when I was auditing. I saw a lot of errors where agents are listing homes. If you go to the tax records show the listings in a trust, the homes in a trust, and we have a listing with no trust information on there. So now, not only did you upload it, now we're gonna have to kick it back and say, we're just rejecting that whole file. You're gonna have to recreate it and upload again, right? Because you have it on the wrong checklist, right? So be careful about that.
Real quick, Bruce, how would you recommend the agent verify that?
Tax records is the number one thing, although sometimes the tax records do not properly reference that it's in a trust.
So maybe talk with the seller?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, ask the seller, do they have a trust or something? And I will say this, on the tax records, whatever's at the top with their names, it's not always accurate. It's the county. If they've had a attempt to it, they just screw it up. But if you go to the bottom, there'll be transaction records, loan, anytime they change the loan, or anytime there was an actual transactional sale that happened. If you look at that transaction records, it will show you who was the buyer and who was the seller. And if you look at the buyer, if the buyer is a trust name, or they refied into trust name, or there was a change, they'll say no, if there's a change, it'll show it into the person name into a trust name. And I see a lot where it shows it down there where it moved from a person to a trust, but it hasn't changed up top, right? So you need to look all the way down the trust record and look at what's the last transaction. Did they actually put in the trust?
So we have a question on Zoom. What happens if a buyer does an AOAA and changes to a trust or entity? Do we have to recreate another checklist?
Okay.
What?
It's a little off track. Okay. When you do an AOA, does everyone know what an AOA is? All right. If AOA is when you're going to remove a person from the contract, or you're going to add someone to the contract, or sign the contract for that, or you're going to sign it. You use it. I see a lot of these addendums like this buyer had a contract, you're going to get flagged, And we're gonna say, no, give us an AOAA, because there's a language in the AOA that we need to have whenever you take someone off or put someone on. In that AOAA, it says if you're bringing someone new on, they have to acknowledge receipt of all the disclosures and contracts. So literally, you're almost going to close. They want to add the wipe to the loan at the end, so they cannot time it. You put it, we're gonna go in and we're gonna redline everything in your file and say, get your new buyer to initial everything. Because now they're coming on late, they're part of the transaction, they must do it. If you move it to a trust though, remember, trust can't sign, entities can't sign, entities don't have a signature, only people have a signature. So if it's their buyers in AOA and they're putting it in their trust, they do AOA, we're not gonna tag it because they've already signed everything and they're the actual trustee. Does that make sense?
Actually, I can simplify this a
Okay.
bit more. Vince, if you could put back the original document. All right. So you see right here where it says residential on the listing, non-trust or entity. And then on the purchase, residential, non-trust or entity. That's referring to the seller only. Okay? I'm sorry, to the property that is being purchased from a seller. So you could be a trust buyer purchasing a property and still fall within a probate template or a mobile home template.
These templates are based on where the seller is.
Yeah.
Not where the buyer is. Yes.
So another question, can someone create templates based on the required documentation? Or can we have a training on making all of these templates?
Okay. Zip forms, in your zip access, where you produce all your forms, you can create templates.
Yeah.
And I guess we could have a training, but all I bring in is I'll bring in a webinar video from CAR, because CAR has a bunch of webinars that say this is how you do your templates. And you can take these checklists and you can name them all, and you can literally create them within your zip forms, and you would have complete file.
And piggybacking off that, we've made it really easy in these templates. If you can bring up another one,
Which one do you want?
any of them's fine. If you look at all of these, every single one that has a car form reference, it's gonna have the form code.
So we put the form codes on here. So if you're really confused about what the form is, just if you go in there and search and you hit the code, type in the code, it'll pull up the form.
Yeah, and
I thought you had to put in the name.
No, you can put in the code and it'll come right
Yeah.
up. If you put ABID, it'll come up. So-
Yeah. So, another way this can help you and your TCs is, I mean, I still get confused even on the old templates, where to find certain things when I'm going through them. So I've learned, maybe it was Vince, I don't know who showed me about Control F. If you're in a browser, you hit Control F, it brings up a search window. And in command, you can type in the form code and it'll locate that form on the template. Yeah, did you know that? You did know that, okay.
So I want you to know, we also structured it by the structure of the transaction. So you have your contract docs and then initial contract addendums. So we're doing things in order so that you can understand where things lie in the transaction.
All right, before I get into some of the changes here, I do want to tell you, we didn't want to just spring this on everybody and have you all of a sudden, scrambling, trying to get all your stuff, trying to get documents that maybe you didn't need before, but now you do need, things like that. So this is going to be implemented the morning of January 1st, 2024. Right? Not gonna,
So when you go there on January 1st, 2024, the old checklist will disappear and these will be the only checklists.
yeah,
But don't worry, if your transaction was on an old checklist, it will stay
it'll
there.
stay there.
And we will still audit it on that transaction, but after 24, you only be able to use new transactions.
So who can answer? Wait, hold on a second. Who can answer? How many days do you have to get a listing entered into command?
Great.
You win the prize. How many days do you have once you get a ratified contract to enter it into command?
Great.
Perfect. So what does that mean? That means if you take a listing or if you get a ratified contract from December 30th on, unless you get it entered in before January 1st, you're gonna have to be in compliance with the new templates. So plan accordingly.
And by the way, that 3-day thing is the biggest compliance issue we have.
Yeah.
Bar none in this part. You do not, when it says you do 3 days, it means you upload it to command within 3 business days. And by far, that's the biggest non-compliance.
Should we pass the Avid issue?
Say that
We
again?
passed the Avid issue from last time?
No, we're gonna talk about the Avid issue again.
It's Avid's a big issue. It's not, Avid actually got better. We worked a lot, but 3 days is a lot.
So, Vince, if you can shut this one down again for me. And scroll up a little bit. No, the other way, I'm sorry. Keep going. Okay. Now, you'll see at the bottom of the purchase templates, there's one that's kind of indented. It's linked to Google Sheet containing all. I put this in a horrible place. That's my lack of technology. But if you click that link, and you'll all have access to this through that page. This will bring up the actual Google Sheet with all the tabs, so you can better see how these.
And the
things are
tab
set.
had the checklist on the bottom,
Yeah.
so you can just scroll to it and you can literally copy. You can't edit it, but you can copy it.
Right. So hopefully between this and the PDFs that you'll have access to, you can make some nice lists.
So all you C types, you'll like this. If you're a
Thank you,
D,
ladies.
you won't like this at all.
And again, if you see something that you feel is questionable, that it maybe shouldn't be there, or, you know, you have a good solid argument, you can back it up with, you know, with cogent facts, let me know. Like I said, I'm not infallible. Oh,
So on the closing docs, I see you got the communication law #1, and it says upload emails, you don't have anything about text messages.
that's because we aren't requiring text messages. Right, DRE doesn't require them at this point.
No kidding. That's huge, because.
Although text messages can be used as evidence in an investigation.
Yeah.
Or
Don't
in a
throw them away
dispute,
by any.
but they're not requiring us to collect that.
If you have them for your file, we're not gonna refuse them, absolutely.
I want to touch it. This is also the biggest way where agents or TC, try to trick the auditor, is they will upload like 5 emails.
Yes.
Just so you know, we open it and it tells us the page count, and usually on an average transaction, it's usually hovering between 200 and 400 pages of emails.
Right.
And you upload something that says 12, well, that's why there's communication 1, communication 2, because we will say, no, upload the rest of the emails. And I will say, we will go through the emails. A lot of times it's only the TC's emails. I can tell because it's all DocuSigns, right? And I'm like, no, get the agency email. And it's really easy, you just go in and grab it. And if you use Folio, it just grabs them right, it makes a PDF for you of the agent's emails too. So we're looking for the agents where they say, no, we want $5,000 credit. We want those communications, because that's where the disputes generally happen, right? So.
Also, communications between you and your client, you know, when you're coming up with your list price, things like that. And we'll get into more of that in just a second.
Also, technology wise, if you want to download this, once you open it up, file, and then download, we'll download it directly to your system. You could do an Excel sheet or any of these others if you want to have it for your personal record.
Oh, thank you, man. All right, let's see. One of the reasons that we thought this was a good time to do this is because, as you've noticed, over the last year, CAR has added a lot of forms. And they've modified a lot of them. But the big thing was they added a lot. So this takes into consideration the added forms, what we thought would be helpful and important for our transaction files and things like that. Again, we wanted to add the buyer broker type documents because although this
Vince, can you open one of the first ones?
Yeah, sure.
So I want to show this is one of the things we filled out a lot. When you go into command, there's a consulting tab, there's a consultation tab, and right now it's blank. No one loads anything in there. This is for the buyer, so you have a buyer. So we have put in the buyer compensation package. As you know, like he said, CAR is very much recommending that you use a buyer broker agreement when you're representing buyers. We have talked about that incessantly. the lawsuit that everyone talking about, the national lawsuit, is literally talking about this issue where they're saying we're all colluding because we're making the sellers pay you buyer's agent when you represent the buyer, and that's illegal. That's antitrust. Right? So and it's gonna take a few years to resolve itself, don't get me wrong, but it could end up to where it says the buyers have to pay you.
Well, okay, so
Yeah.
time out.
Yeah.
Hold your guns. So one of the things that's kind of a misnomer is California so far has been exempt from this type of lawsuit. And the reason we were exempt, or one of the big reasons we were exempt, is because we do our listing contracts differently than they were doing in Missouri and some of these other states. On our listing contracts, as you know, there's two sections that reference commission on the first page. The top part says that the listing agent is going to charge X%. The bottom part is where the listing agent is saying that they are going to pay through a cooperative broker agreement a portion of their commission to the buyer side. It is not saying that the seller is paying the buyer's commission. And that's one of the big distinctions between the way we do business here and what's gone on in this Missouri suit. Now, whether the Department of Justice, whether some other courts out here might eventually say that's still going to be antitrust and still taking that right away from the seller, who knows? You never can tell what a jury is going to decide. But that's the big reason that we are not technically in any sort of a violation on that right now.
Yeah, so California, you can even look at some of the settlements from Remax and Cold Banker they did on it. And a lot of the activities are what we already do. They say you must disclose that all commissions are negotiable. Well, if you look at the listing agreement, in bold print says all commissions are negotiable, right? You must disclose that you're taking somebody you know this buyer commission with. I will say though, we are recommending doing buyer broker agreements. Highly recommend you do buyer broker agreements with your buyers. You're going to have to do a little more presentation than opening the door for them to get them to sign one like that. You can do that. My team is practicing that, and I can tell you it's actually a standard practice in Southern California. So
Is it really?
yeah, so in Southern California, everyone does buyer broker agreements down there. So it's not like it's not a practice that we can't learn skills and adopt. And I suspect it's going to, based on what Carr is saying, and I bet DRE weighs in at some level on this too. But that's what I'm saying. It may not be even a lawsuit. DRE may say, no, you need to have this. And the reason we're not in this soup is because DRE is so proactive, is known as being very proactive on regulation of real estate agents. We're just the head of where Missouri is. That's why we don't have a lawsuit. But that doesn't mean that they can just go ahead and say, no, or private brokers are assigned.
And my understanding is California is going to be requiring them in the next couple of years.
And that's why Carr is saying we recommend you do that because they see it coming down that likely will have a requirement either legislatively or through DRE that will say you will be required to have a buyer broker, at least contract in there. Now, if you get compensated from the seller, that's fine. But from the listing agent, that's fine. But you got to have a buyer broker to agree to work. So we have put those in.
All right. One of the major changes to these templates, if you are listing a property, we are going to ask and require that when you list a property and you're working with that seller, do your due diligence and at least at a minimum, print a MetroList CMA report that you can present to your client, documenting with your client that you are proposing to list it at least its fair market value. And then we're going to want you to have that client sign that CMA document. What we don't want is a situation where a year after you sell the property, the client comes back and claims that the agent was just after their commission. They had me undersell the property. I didn't want to sell it that low, but they told me that's what it was worth. So at least do your due diligence, get it into our file. We have some sort of documentation. I'm not asking for any kind of, grandiose, appraisal. I mean, just whatever MetroList provides in their CMA report is fine. Make sure.
And if you're taking a listing without showing the seller comps, I would argue you're not doing your fiduciary duty.
I agree.
So we're just asking that we have proof that you do that, because we have had disputes literally where it's listed at a price, they're getting multiple offers, but their sister wants to buy, the sister wants to buy it because it's the low price and they're getting in, and then we get a call from the wife saying, this is low, or your agent's selling it too low, we shouldn't have sold it this low, they're just trying to make it happen. Make sense? And so, but if we have comps to say, we showed you the comps, you okayed the price, that's a different story, right? So.
I have a question, sorry. So Bruce, you want us to I always do CMA, always, and I always present. So, thank you. But what I'm asking is this, you want us to have them sign that
Just
CMA?
have them sign.
Sign it,
But
or initial it, or whatever.
If we're signing CMA, what if the projected price that I've suggested is in the CMA, correct, like 450, right? And they say, you know what, I wanna do 440, I gotta get the sucker sold, okay?
That's fine. We'll have that in your notes though.
But we just wanna note though, that like, you showed them this, if you said show them CMA, it says 500,
Yeah,
and we listed at 440 because we wanna go fast,
yeah,
that's fine.
that's okay.
Because they signed off saying, yeah, I saw the comps and I thought I could have got 500,
Oh, I see.
but you know, but
Yeah.
we listed it, but we signed the contract at 440. We find the listing agreement at 440.
That's Rich.
Question, so on this, so is it just the one line that you're recommending that we have an initial?
Yeah, the one line CMA.
Yeah, so we're not asking for your full, cloud CMA one. If you want to, you can just make a one line, CMA, write a metro list and have that initial that. That's all we really.
Now, if you do cloud CMA though, that's fine.
That's fine.
Look at it.
Don't-
What I'm saying is if we email them a copy, say we don't have them initially, if we email them a copy. And we just ask them at the bottom of that email, hey, can you confirm receipt of this document with an email back in response, would that suffice?
Do you have a way a year and a half from now of reproducing the CMA?
Yeah, it's all Stacy's actually cloud CMA that holds it.
I would,
That's
I guess
true.
from an auditing perspective, if we had the CMA and we had your email chain showing they received it, we would accept that, but we'd have to have the CMA and the emails.
We have to be able to see the,
Yeah, if we uploaded that file in the documentation saying, hey, here's our transfer.
Here's the actual CMA and here's them saying they received it. But we need acknowledgement that the seller received the CMA.
We could just include that in our communication file for the command file.
no, on the line, we have a line item to upload the CMA.
So your TC, they would say, give me the CMA, I didn't get it approved. Honestly, your TCs, if they're gonna have to get it signed, they're just gonna include it with the rest of the DocuSign and have them
There you
initial,
go.
honestly. That's what they're gonna do, honestly.
Totally.
So, but they're just gonna ask you next time you do a listing, where's your CMA? And you're gonna be like, here, and they're just gonna scan it in and include it in your, and all the other disclosures, right? And they're just gonna get them to sign it, right? So that's what's gonna happen.
Our team normally downloads the PDF version of Cloud CMA
Mhm,
and sends it to all our sellers.
Yeah,
I do too.
Would
Would
you
that
do it?
work instead of having it signed?
like I said, we can, but we would need a copy of the CMA uploaded along with the email showing they received it.
PDF.
We would need the PDF of the, because when they come a year later, or they come 6 months later, says they undersold the property, I need a copy of that, I said, the comp showed this, right?
You can always pull up a copy of the PDF, but the actual, what Rich is saying, you can't. That's why download the PDF and send it directly to the seller.
Right, if you send the
can edit
link,
it anytime.
yeah, but I would say download, send it, and then we see in the email, you sent the PDF, and then we have we actually the physical PDF in there along with the email.
Yes.
Then that's sufficient, because we know that they received it.
A lot easier for everyone.
So if you use CAR like it's intended, there's a place in there for you to create an email for each file that you're doing. So anytime you email your, either a listing agent or a buyer's agent, you want to reach the and title, all of that stuff automatically goes directly into CAR, your email and the attachment. So if you go into and look at your transaction,
Yes.
it will give you like an inbox and that there's two of them that it creates. So one of them is where all of the attachments goes. You can click on it and open it up and it shows it there. So when you're doing your emails, basically you can do them together and then download it as one PDF.
Too many.
So part of this, if this is an issue for you, you should probably talk to your coach, because then you're not doing real estate correctly. You should show them. You should show them comps and decide on the.
On a side note, I always save that PDF into the file of my seller,
We do, so on our side, when we save this, we save the PDF in there, because, yeah, you get to speak, trust me, I've had a mid transaction, you say, we listed this price. They end up, you end up getting a second offer 40,000 under, And then next, you've been talking to the husband and the wife calls you like.
Yeah.
How'd you talk us into a lower price? You're like, you signed the doc, but they're still mad, right? You can be like, we went over the comps, right?
Yeah, but you signed it, and I've got a copy of it.
Is that, I have a copy. Oh, yeah. Remember we talked about this? Yeah.
All right, moving on. No, we haven't. The other thing along with the CMA, when you take a listing, do a net sheet for your client.
Oh, yeah.
Because I can't tell you, and this is coming up more and more often now. You list the property, you do all your marketing, you get an offer in that the seller accepts, and then the seller realizes, oh crap, I'm not gonna net what I thought I'm gonna net.
We've literally had this dispute.
Yeah.
Literally had this dispute.
There's no need to complicate this, guys. Download a PDF version of the CMA cloud. I'm sorry, the CMA package, the net sheet, and the property profile from the tax records, all three. Email it, you're done.
We already require the property profile. So anyways, I'm gonna say this. If you want it simple, go talk to Monty upstairs. First American has an app. You can approve it, and literally in the app, you can make net sheets right there. And guess what? On that net sheet, you can either send it, you can literally text it to your clients from there, and it has a signature line on it. And you just give them a sign. And literally on our listings, we get them to sign the net sheet, because I'll be damned if I say, because you'll get people say, you said, John, you told me I would make 140,000 on the sale, and I get the net sheet at the end, and they don't want to sign because they're only making 120. I said, no, we talked about 120. See here, right? And then trust me, they will tell you things, right? So
Well, because they forget.
they forget, or they were hoping for some better number.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Or a miracle.
Oh, miracle, yeah, exactly.
Right.
And we've literally had disputes about this, literally where listings signed in contract about to close, and then the seller's not netting what they thought they would net, and they want coming in and trying to cancel 3 transactions at once.
Yeah,
With
and
three different-
this is actually as recently as this last week. We had a seller that canceled the contract they were under, refusing to move forward with it. And now there's problems, obviously. So you just want to avoid that. Moving on the buy side, representing a buyer. Do a market analysis on the property that you're submitting an offer on. Again, we're perfectly fine, using a Metrolist CMA form, one line. That's perfectly fine. The reason you want to do this though, is imagine the market in the summer of 2020. For those of you who were here working in real estate, listing agents getting 50 offers over the list price. People bidding 50, 100, 150,000 over list price to get a property. Imagine being a buyer's rep for one of those buyers, and they just spent 50,000 over the list price. And now, a year and a half, 2 years later, their property is worth a lot less than when they bought it. And they're looking back at their real estate agent saying, why did you make me pay so much money for that property? Well, the reality is a CMA isn't going to save us, but what it will do is it will show that you presented to your client, this is what the fair market value is today. I know you may need to pay more than this in order to get the deal, but I just want to disclose to you, this is the actual value. You can choose to pay more if you want.
I just want to ask you, who is not comping, representing the buyer and comping the home prior to writing an offer? Anyone not doing that?
Anybody willing to admit not to?
Okay, so you all doing it, and you're probably just pulling up a Metro List and pulling the CMA out, right, and talking about comp, right? So all you have to do is download it, right? Because we want to show them, because we literally, we had disputes during COVID, literally, an agent got someone in contract, it was like 50,000 over this price during COVID, right? And the agent never discussed that it was like, could be overappraised value, you're gonna have appraisal issues.
Right.
Never discussed it with them. And then they come back and say, I have to come with an extra 50 because it appraised at what it should have appraised up. And like, it blows up the loan, and then the buyer's back because I paid for inspections and I paid $800 for an appraisal.
And
And
the
a
buyer-
rep fee,
and the
and they're
buyer-
looking at the agent being like, you never told me, I lost all this money because you never told me, right? And so we're asking for a comp, so that way when they go over you can have a discussion that says. You just know you're paying over and these are maybe the consequences of that.
It's okay to do that.
Yeah.
But just do it
Here's
with
the
full
part,
knowledge.
yeah.
Well, there's a line item though within the buyer, within the RPA, that you can put that in, if it should appraise, blah, 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 over, then the buyer agrees to pay.
And how many
There's no
agents are
total.
going over step by step on the RPA
Yeah, when they sign off on it.
prior to, while the buyer is signing it? Because I know you're all DocuSign and say, here you go, right? So, as our TC laughs.
All right, moving on. This is one that I think you guys will like. I know it'll be helpful on the compliance side for us. How many of you, working with buyers, you get, you go under contract and the listing side does what they are supposed to do and they give you previous inspection. Yeah. They give you previous inspections that the seller had received from a prior buyer.
And I
Right?
just want to know, if you're on a listing and a previous buyer does inspection, you get copied. Those are required disclosures that you must give to the next
That the
buyer
seller
that cancel. If there's an appraisal done, that's a required disclosure.
No, seller, no. Only if the appraisal references deficiencies in property.
Gov Hutchinson disagrees.
Gov Hutchinson's wrong. I'm telling you, Gov Hutchinson's wrong.
There's no harm in sending.
No, but I'll say this, and he said this, is like, if the appraiser does a square footage measurement on the home, it's an inspection.
That's.
And all appraisals do an estimate on the square foot measurement, if the appraiser measured the home square footage, it's an inspection.
Yeah,
So,
the appraisal is not a disclosable item, but if there's a discrepancy on the square footage measurement, if there's a if it references. This value of 150,000 that I'm assigning is subject to the repairs referenced in section such and such. Those repairs are disclosed, but it's just that page, not the entire appraisal.
Might be a silly question. You know, sometimes sellers don't get the inspection, we get a cancellation for. And is it our responsibility to track those inspections down to send to the next buyer?
What, as a listing agent, what you should be doing is sending a request to the buyer's agent.
Okay.
Say, hey, you know, you never sent me a copy of the home inspection or
Appraisal.
or not appraisal, unless they're canceling because of.
if they're canceling to the appraisal, you can request it. If
Okay,
they're-
Bruce, I'm sorry to disagree, but that protects you. If you didn't get a copy of it, you don't have to disclose it.
If you know it was done, you should ask for it.
As a listing agent, remember that fiduciary duty of disclosure is required. If you know an inspection was done on a property, if you don't have a copy, you would still have to disclose that.
Yeah.
Because
Because
even as a listing agent, you would have to disclose that. Is there something that you know that can affect the value desire of the property? If you know there's inspections that potentially show deficiencies on the property and you know about them,
which is
then
why.
you are required by law to disclose that to the new buyer.
Which is why the RPA has a requirement that they turn over copies.
Actually, and there's a requirement in the RP that the buyers do any inspection, they're required to disclose it to the buyers, to the sellers. They're required to.
And if there's a contractor that goes out there with the buyer's friend. And they don't have any paper, they verbally say, this is what's going on, this is why we're canceling. Do you disclose that to the next buyer?
Boy, he's a licensed contractor.
Yeah,
If he's a licensed contractor and he
but,
puts,
and there's no paper report because he's not an inspector.
if there's no paper or report, I probably, but if I don't have a document to disclose, I would say probably, no, you don't have to disclose that. But I might do a third party disclosure that says, I was told by, or seller was told by such and such John Smith, licensed contractor, that there's a problem with this.
And actually, recently there's a listing, I don't know who's here, but Luke's doing it, and same thing. Buyer walks in, her dad's a contractor, so her dad does the inspection, right? And there's no paperwork, but they send over one picture of a deficient issue, the cover over the HVAC is off. You know, the cover, you open.
That's all you know.
Well, amongst other things, but they literally took a picture of it and sent the email saying the cover's off on this. So at that point, now I have something, so I would PDF that email, and disclose it the next time we buy that buyer, right?
There's always gonna be gray areas.
And the thing is if you have knowledge that can potentially impact the value or desirability of the home. By law, your fiduciary is you must disclose that to the other party. That is the requirement.
And to take it worst case scenario, we actually had a claim within this office where an agent, now this was actually fraud though, but an agent ordered a roof inspection for one of his listings. The agent ordered the inspection. It had not very good results in the report. And the agent, when he listed the property and sold it, never disclosed that report to the buyer.
Oh, jeez.
That's fraud, but it's all.
Yeah.
The worst part is it's fraud on your part. Maybe the seller doesn't even know. You disclose that they're suing you and the seller. And we think this, if the seller loses, what do you think the seller's gonna do?
Sue you.
Sue you. But now you have two lawsuits, right? So,
Disclosures is the single biggest area
Of
that will
lawsuit.
get agents and brokerages sued. All right, so let's see, what did I leave off? Oh, so seller completed or received inspections that they turn over to you. We expanded that section to not just one line item that you can put it in, but we have seller home inspection, seller tendered pest inspection, seller tendered roof inspections, et cetera, et cetera.
and I think we put more inspections.
Yeah, there's,
And right now, there used to be only those three, and you'd have to ad hoc in the new ones, but we put a bunch more inspections in there. Scroll down. Inspection reports here. So we put well test, sewer, a bunch of these in there, because some of those, if I see that it's a septic tank or we are, see it's a septic tank, we're gonna go down and check that required, like you should have that inspected so that you know, as agents, you know what you should be getting inspected on the property.
so, pest inspection, seller provided, home
Home
inspection, sewer inspection,
Other.
other, et cetera, et cetera.
And to your know, a contractor bid is an inspection.
Yeah.
So if someone says the HVAC is not working right, they have a contract come on bid, that is an inspection, right? So.
And for those of you who are not aware of it, who have not attended any of my classes, if a seller turns over a prior inspection and your buyer sees it, they might even sign the front of it. That inspection actually offers them no legal protection if that inspector made a mistake. Because there's no privity of contract between that home inspector and your client. Which is why even if the seller provides those inspections, you should be encouraging your client to get their own inspections.
Especially on pest inspectors, the parents who
Yeah.
have pest inspectors, remember that the person who they inspected for, they give a warranty to say there's gonna be no dry rot or on that for a certain period of time.
Yeah.
If your buyer relies on someone else who got that inspection, that does not transfer to that new buyer, right?
And so you'll see on the actual inspections that are required, inspection or buyer inspection waiver, one or the other.
And that's the biggest thing. We see where there's like, oh, they didn't want to do any inspections. We are gonna require the buyer inspection waiver. That you sign off to said, and that's actually, which is funny, it's like, we're trying to help you get out of jail. Because it says, I told you to get a home and I told you to get a pest. And you didn't. And we're gonna require that even if you got seller provided, if the seller provided a pest home, we're still gonna make you sign a BIW. Because it's your get out of jail free card, right? So, and I don't know why the hardest I know on the auditing side, it's always the last thing to come in because they never get it signed. I'm like, this should be the first thing you want signed. This is the actual thing. The number one issue that people get sued on real estate, lack of disclosure. That's the number one lawsuit by far in California on real estate. And the number one thing that gets you out of jail and lack of disclosure is BIW.
And we as an office, we have relied on those BIWs. I can't tell you how often I've gotten calls from sellers, or I'm sorry, from buyers. Who, my agent, they told me not to get any inspections or whatever, and I pull up the file and lo and behold, we find the BIW there.
And we say, BIW, no, we told you.
Now, along those lines though, please don't be one of those agents that you're having a discussion with your client about what inspections they should be ordering. And you say to them, the seller gave us a home inspection, the seller gave us a pest inspection. You can get an inspection if you want, but I know you're short on cash. I know you don't have the extra $400.
Oh, boy.
Well, like $1,000 that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't want to get one, I understand it. Don't be the person that says that to them and then shove a BIW in front of their face and say initial here. Because if there ever is a problem, you're gonna be sitting in a deposition and they're gonna sit, and the attorney is gonna say to you, Mr. Agent, didn't you have them sign a fire inspection waiver? And you're gonna say, yeah, and they signed it, here it is. And then the next question out of their mouth is gonna be, but did you tell them that they really didn't need to get an inspection?
Oh.
And it's gonna be your word versus their word, and guess what the court's like?
So, you know, stick to your guns, try to get. them-
Yeah, so when they say no, you need to say like, I always recommend we get our own inspections. or things like that. And they may say, no, I'm comfortable with that, that's fine, the idea, right?
All right, moving on, we've simplified the referral templates.
Oh my gosh, that is.
Yeah, so you can click either one of them then. As you can see, we need a referral agreement and then the normal stuff. If you're on a team, if you're assigning a commission to your corporation or LLC, and then commission.
For those who did referrals, we were getting a lot of, because we were making track down like other stuff,
Emails.
and NHDs and all this stuff. So we eliminate all that. And remember, this referral even applies to if you're referring a buyer to a new home.
Well, there's a separate template for them.
Oh, which we cleaned up as well.
Yeah, so you can go there, and I'm actually gonna, yeah, there you go. And I'm gonna make one more change to the new home template. You can see here under the contract docs, basically, if it happens to be a personal transaction, you put it, make note of that there. Co-op form from the builder, new home purchase contract. Agency disclosure right now is required. I'm gonna make that conditionally required. Sometimes there is an agency disclosure with you, sometimes there's not. So that'll be changed to conditional. And then the closing section is all normal stuff. But just much simpler than it was before.
Bruce, I'm sorry, I'm confused. It is under conditional right now. You are gonna require AD?
No, what do you, no, the AD is required on there. I'm not going to require it, it'll be conditional.
No, it's conditional part.
No, that's for the
No,
fire
that's for
brokers.
the-
Procedure for this side, right over here.
Oh, I see what you're saying. On that side.
Yeah. Everybody clear on that? And then finally, I just want on the, if you can close this one, thank you. If you look on the purchase transactions, I did throw one in there for a short sale or NOD file. I did want to point out, short sales may or may not be coming back. If they do, this template has specific forms that would be required for a short sale transaction. The one thing I wanted to point out is there are some dangers if an NOD has been filed. An NOD stands for notice of default. Sometimes when you have a short sale listing, you also potentially are running into a foreclosure deadline. And if an NOD has been filed, so that's the first stage in the foreclosure.
A notice of default.
Notice of default. There are certain legal prohibitions that come into play if you are representing a buyer and the property is owner occupied by the seller. So if you list a short sale listing and then it's an absentee owner. So let's just say he had it as an investment property. You have a short sale listing, you get a buyer and that buyer is an investor, that's fine. But if the owner of the property is living in it and you get an investor buyer and there's been an NOD filed, there's legal prohibitions that would prohibit him from accepting that offer.
And that's why you get their notice of default purchase agreement. So you need to know if you're buying, your buyer's an investor and he's buying a short sale and there's a notice of default and they're owner occupied, you have to use a different contract for that.
No. The notice of default purchase agreement is for if it is not an owner occupied property and a notice of default is provided. If it's owner occupied, we can't, It's illegal, basically, in the absence of doing certain hoops that are.
You have to do a 3-day.
Yeah, there's all sorts of other stuff that make it almost impossible to do. So, I just wanna make that,
If you have an investor and they wanna offer on a short sale where there's the NOD in there, you need to talk to Bruce.
Talk to
because-
me.
Because there's a 3-day waiting period that could kick in all these laws, and it's really like, there's been lawsuits on this where investors have gone in where there's NODs and got the property and didn't do the 3-day waiting period stuff, and the courts have overturned. It literally says, investor sucks, you lost your money, ownership goes back to the seller.
Yep.
And they literally reversed the sale and didn't give the money back to the
and the
investor.
courts have the power to do that.
And
So.
the courts have done that,
So just
so.
remember, if a notice of default has been filed on a property and you're the listing agent or you're the buyer's agent and you're thinking of putting an offer in, or you're thinking of having your seller accept the offer, talk to me first.
Where do we find the NOD? If there's an NOD on the property? Where would it show up?
Prelim.
Come on,
Prelim,
guys,
before the prelim,
come
where
on.
would it show up?
It's,
It would be on your tax property profile, because at the bottom, remember, at the bottom, it records every transaction and that happens that's recorded on the property. One of those will be notice of default, and it will say the date on there, right? So if you look at your tax records, go all the way to the bottom, it will say notice of default on there. So even if you're looking at a listing, you go back to list, just pull the tax records on it. It will show in the transaction notice of default filed on it, right, and record, because that's a recorded document on the property, right? So you don't have to go to prelim, you can literally just look at the tax records, right?
John, quick question.
Oh, yeah, it's not about me.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
So Realist, I have found that Realist is about 2 to 3 weeks behind on updating data.
Correct.
Are we able to like call or go to the county clerk's office to get a more like up-to-date info on the notice of default?
If I was representing the buyer and I was unsure, or you think something happened, or the listing's like, I think maybe a notice of default was filed or something like that, I would ask them, did you pre-open escrow? Because escrow, if they've already done a prelim on the property, they would have found the notice of default at that time, right? And even if they did it like 3 weeks ago and you're worried, you'd ask them, can you update the NOD check again? And they can go and check again and see if then.
and when you list the property on the other side of the transaction, when you list the property, one of the questions on the listing agreement is, do you know of any of these things have happened? Have you filed bankruptcy? Has there been a notice of default filed against you? Has foreclosure, whatever, any of that stuff? That should be a big red flag if you're on the listing.
Yeah, and if you're listing and it's a short sale, or they're in foreclosure issues, you need to check if there's an NOD recorded on the property, because that will affect your sale.
All right, real quick, since I have you all here, a couple of my favorites that I want to talk about real quickly. AVIDs. If you're listing a property, do your AVID immediately in the listing process. Get it out
Don't
of
do
the
it
way.
later.
Get your seller to sign it right away, and you sign it right away. I can't tell you how many transactions we get in compliance, whether our agents, they're on the listing side, on the buy side, whichever side they're on, we're down to the close date and they still haven't turned in their AVID.
I'm gonna say this, I talked with DRE and Carr about this. Because when you fill out the TDS, when you sign at the backside, it says, I'm providing an avid, or here's my notes, that little section where you check the boxes. Now we require you to say, I'm providing an avid, right? When you check I provide an avid, because it's on the TDS, and the TDS is a seller disclosure, and in the contract it says you must provide this in 7 days. DRE and Carr consider your avid, because you're there, that is a required seller disclosure, and it should be due in 7 days.
Yep.
And because it's tied to the TDS, and you remember, there's certain docs that have right of rescission.
5 days.
5 days. So if you legally say you're doing a seller, you're doing a contract on there, and you, as a listing agent, you got your avid laid in. Legally, when you give your avid laid in, technically that's tied to the TDS, which is a mandatory disclosure in the state of California. They get 5 days registered. So even if they release contingencies and everything, you just gave them another 5 days to cancel. Because you got your avid late. And think about, you're at day 25 and you do that and they get cold feet because they're doing layouts at the job and the buyer wants to cancel on that. You can't say no and your sell's already moved out. And you say, I thought they released contingencies. What's gonna happen? They're gonna be pissed at you, right?
How would you like to explain that to your client? Why the buyer gets to walk, not even forfeit their
And
deposit?
we were not luckily on our side, but we had a buyer, literally that situation happened. They were in contract, all contingency release. We're about to go sign, it's like 3 days to close. The buyer's company, literally he works here in Sacramento, came to him and says, we're doing layoffs, we're laying off 20% of the workforce. We don't know yet, but in 30 days, we're gonna notify who's laid off. He's like, whoa, I don't wanna buy a house, I'm gonna get laid off. I'm not gonna have a job, right? So he wants to cancel. So the agent company's like, how can we cancel? We're gonna lose the deposit, blah, blah, blah. I go, did they give you any required disclosure? And literally he gave the avid late, and I said, cancel on date of rescission, and we rescinded. And the broker called me like, you can't do that. I was like, write a rescission, call Car Legal, right? And Car Legal, we canceled the deal, got our deposit back. Guess what? Next you know, listing canceled. And I told the agent, and he went back and got the listing and doubled it.
Wow.
So your seller's gonna be pissed if they moved out and you, because of what you lack of disclosed, caused a right of rescission to be put in place for the buy side to cancel, right? So.
Right, also on ABIDs. So just to back up, the ABID is required under the civil code. You must do your ABID. Now, if you're on the buy side, you do your ABID, your buyer signs it, you send it over to the listing side, and the listing side never gets it back to you. They don't have the seller sign it, the agent doesn't sign it, nothing ever happens for it. What you need to do for your TC is document your request that you've requested them to sign this and send it back, and they haven't done so. Then upload it along attached with those emails showing that you've requested it. You know, you can't be nice if we could police the other side of the transaction, but unfortunately we can't. We're not going to hold that against you. But what I don't want to see is don't wait until after it closes escrow or the day or 2 days before it closes. And all of a sudden you or your TC is in a flurry of panic and emails trying to get the other side to send it over.
And I can tell you that, we see that a lot, where agents are coming to us and says, I couldn't get the seller to sign my avid. And then we see the avid was done at the time of walkthrough. Final walkthrough, and it's right the day before it closes. And we're like, and they're saying we won't sign because it's closed already.
Yeah. Which
And
they're
we're gonna be
right.
like, that's because you gave them 24 hours to sign a doc. Yeah, I would say no too, right? So do your due diligence. And when you mark that TDS, technically you're saying, I'm gonna get this as a seller disclosure within 7 days.
On the buy side with the ABIDs. As many of you, if you've listened to me in my classes, probably know, you can't just, it's a violation of your fiduciary duty. It's also a violation of Metrolis rules to just go out to a listing for your buyer, access the Supra, get the key, open the door for the home inspector to go in and then just leave. You're supposed to stay there while the home inspector is doing their inspection, unless the listing agent gets permission from the seller and says, no, they can just leave. Okay. So while you're out there and the home inspector is doing their thing, do your ABID. That's going to be done early on in the transaction. And you get it knocked off.
Yeah, when I was doing my buy sites, literally I would take the physical avid, and I would literally like fill it out there while they're doing inspection because they got nothing better to do. And then I would like, when they come see the inspection, talk to, oh, here's my agent inspection, go over it, please sign, and they sign it right there, and I'm done, right? Done. Take it by TC, here you go, right? So.
This practice that Taylor just started doing is he's voice recording when he like goes and does a little walkthrough. That way this, you know.
And often you can use, what do you call it? Glide.
Glide.
And then glide, and you just, it's really simple. You have picture, like just walk around, do it, and then it goes back and they sign it done, right? Yeah.
Literally use Glide for everything. And you just voice talk it in, boom, sets it all up, everything I say. It's so simple.
So if you're not doing it that way, we know it's because you're being lazy, so. But don't make us come yell at you, because if you're gonna say, oh, I need my check release, and here's my 3 requests, but we noticed you did the avid after close, we're gonna be like, yo, we're gonna have a talk session first about business practices before we release that check in.
Are we requiring seller initials on avids?
It has I think Carr's position is they aren't required to sign it, but why not ask for it?
And then another comment, but in a previous training, you said do not do your avid same time and date as your inspection.
I didn't say that. Bob Brand said that, and I disagree with him.
What happened?
Oh,
I recommend you do this. Because he was saying, if the inspector goes around and points at something to you. Then now you have knowledge of it, now on your avid, you gotta disclose that because you have knowledge. So what I did is like, when I went there, because I knew that, so I said, inspectors, do your thing, I don't wanna know anything till the end. And then I went and go did my avid, and I could say, I told them, and they could say, I didn't talk to you at all about any issues, I only talked to issues when they came back with the seller, and we talked issues. When the buyer came in and we talked, and I knew.
and
I could say, the first time I heard about this, and here's my disclosure, right, so.
The way I do it, I don't know how everybody else does it, when you do the avid, ask if anybody else is present, the answer is always no.
No,
but it's not always. no.
not always, no.
Always no.
No, it is not always. No, the home inspector might say,
It's always no.
no, it is the
No.
full answer for what it is.
I'll put home inspection stuff like that, but I'll just say, I'm not talking to you about any issues till close, I'm gonna do my avid and fix it up without knowledge of what you.
I've never had any.
Rich did not get
One second, I just, before we get to Vince's,
Oh my God.
question, I just want to say, whether you're on the buy side or on the listing side, we are all paid a shit ton of money to do not so much work.
Yeah.
And
really.
And, you know, your client that you're working for, they're either selling the largest asset they own, or they're buying the biggest asset they may ever own. And we need to give them 100%. And for the amount of money that we are paid to do this, it is not a lot to ask to stay there while the home inspection is being done. Go through and make a diligent AVID while you're there. Make sure the paperwork is correctly done. Make sure they get the inspections they need to
And
protect
I
them.
want to say this, not only that, but like, this is your customer service. When you send 20 DocuSigns during the transaction because you're late on things and things aren't being filled out right, and things like that, you think they don't notice that you're sending a bunch of docs to get corrected all the time? Do they think that doesn't reflect on your ability as an agent? I mean, I just want to note it, like, the reason when we're saying, do your CMAs, do your stuff, you see all the teams that, all the people that do a lot of business are all like, oh, that's standard. That's standard. Why? Because you should be doing it. And that's good practice and good customer service. So that's why they get a lot of referrals in business. And that's why they have a lot of business, because they treat their clients at 100%. Right. And so we're just, you know, just don't look at it as like it's required, but look at it as like, this is how people feel good about you. How do people feel good? It's not just because you talk to them on the phone, it's because the whole transaction seems very organized and smooth and not stressful, right?
And because they feel like you're working for them.
For them, right? Yeah.
Not because you have commission breath and you need to pay your next mortgage payment.
Amethyst just wanted to add that she asked the inspector to not speak to her until she's finished.
Yeah,
Oh, I love her.
I've done that too. When all the things I say, I don't want to know anything. I'm going to do my agent inspection. When we're done, we'll just talk with the buyers about it, right?
All right. That's all that I have. Unless you have something else. Any questions?
Those are the big things on changes. Just note there's going to be additional forms that we're seeing, especially on listings. We're going to ask for the TIL and other things. So there's additional, so please check the checklist, have your TCs check the checklist or your assistant check the checklist, because there are additional disclosures that are going to be required in this. And we can go over every one of them, but they are going to be on there that they'll need to adjust it. So if they're just used to their sending their package and coming back, they're going to have to do a bunch of checks to come back and get more, right?
Right.
So
And if your TC could not make it today, send them that QR code. If they have the QR code, they will be able to access this sheet here, which will give them access, read-only access to all of those.
and if you're
templates and documents.
super anal, you can make checklists and card forms for all this stuff. If you want.
And again, if you find something that you disagree with, don't be afraid to, make your case to me. And
But you better have a good case.
Yeah.
Or you.
Oh, we'll blow you up. So.
Unless you guys have something else.
Any questions? Any other questions? Sorry, that was boring enough. I'm not.
You guys are awesome. Thank you guys.
All right, thank you, everyone. We appreciate
Thank
it. Remember,
you.
January 1st implementation, so you have some time to get used to it, get those checklists in, get them to your TCs, get set up so that we can kind of systemize this out, okay? Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.